This is the Teachlab podcast. I'm Justin Reich.
And I'm Jesse Dukes.
Devin O'Neill is a high school social studies teacher in Oregon. Back in 2021, after 6 years of teaching, she took 2 years off while her husband attended grad school, at MIT actually. And during her break from teaching, she worked designing classroom curriculum.
Which is a super cool experience, very different from being in the classroom, and also really reinforced that I wanted to be in the classroom.
When she was on her break, O'Neill missed 2 momentous years for schools. There was a pandemic, remote learning, hybrid learning, returning to school buildings, and when she went back to the classroom in the fall of 2023, she said there was some culture shock.
It was those 2 super crazy post-COVID years. So I come back and it's like those movies where the caveman defrosts or whatever, and they're like, what is this?
It wasn't just that her fellow teachers were harrowed and burned out while she was fresh and energetic. She also noticed that the student work was, different from what she remembered.
I would have these really well-written paragraphs or snippets that look to be very well researched and all this, but not at all on topic. Grammar was off. Even the most brilliant 14-year-old still talks like a 14-year-old and still writes like a 14-year-old.
So the grammar was oddly good. O'Neill can see her students' screens, and she sometimes watches them work. And one day, she noticed they were using an unusual search engine.
Bing! I was noticing that a lot of them were using Bing to Google stuff. See, even to Google stuff. And I was like, that's the weirdest choice. Who uses Bing?
And then, one day, she was watching a student complete a writing assignment in a Google Doc. And poof, a whole well-written paragraph just appeared out of nowhere.
1 minute's not there, 1 minute's there. And it said, here are your results. And they forgot to delete that.
And that's when Devin realized her students were using ChatGPT to complete in-class writing assignments. They would copy and paste the questions she would give them into Bing's Copilot, which was a free way to use ChatGPT. Then the students copied the answer, sometimes without any editing, right into their Google document.
Just kind of a rookie mistake. If they're going to cheat, you want them to cheat a little bit better.
We first talked to Devin in 2023, just a few weeks after she figured out what was going on. She says that since then, she's gotten a lot more savvy about ChatGPT, but her experience speaks to how much can and did change in schools in just a couple of years.
In November of 2022, ChatGPT was launched as a free research preview of advanced generative AI, like a pilot or a beta version. Generative AI is a type of artificial intelligence that can create new content, especially text, but also images, videos, and music. ChatGPT is the most famous example of generative AI. There are competitors like Google's Gemini, Anthropic's Claude, and the Chinese company DeepSeek. And rather quickly, students figured out ChatGPT was pretty good at doing their homework for them. Devin, out of school for 2 years, working on curriculum, had missed the arrival of the new homework machine. But her students had not.
The arrival of ChatGPT and then fairly quick upgrades within a couple of years has been the big story in education technology since the fall of 2022.
So how does it work? Students can drop an assignment into something like ChatGPT, click a button, and their homework is done.
She's talking about ChatGPT. School districts like New York City's are banning it.
ChatGPT is the new artificial intelligence tool causing a stir.
Schools have scrambled to figure out what to do about ChatGPT. Ban it, embrace it. Teachers have scrambled to get ahead of the cheating problem and to find ways in which AI can support education. Some students have scrambled to figure out how to use AI without their teachers detecting it. And education technology companies have scrambled to create AI-powered edtech and have made many promises about how generative AI will transform education.
But I think we're at the cusp of using AI for probably the biggest positive transformation that education has ever seen. And the way we're going to do that is by giving every student on the planet an artificially intelligent but amazing personal tutor.
My career has been devoted to studying education technology. Over and over again, we've seen that new technologies emerge in education, and the technology developers will promise every time that the new tech will transform and democratize education.
That's what's about to happen.
And while the technologies do sometimes help teachers and students, those big transformations to schools, they never happen.
But there is something different about ChatGPT and other AI. Throughout history, most education technology has been adopted by schools who hope it will help them do better work teaching students. But generative AI wasn't invited into the schools. Not for the most part, it crashed the party. Even if schools ban it from school laptops, students can often get around that ban by using Bing, for example. Or they have their own laptop, or they can access it on their mobile phone, which over 95% of teenagers have. So the kids have access to generative AI, and they're using it whether their teachers want them to or not. That's having a big impact on schools. Now, a little about me and this project. I am a journalist, and for the past year and a half, I've been working with Justin and other colleagues at MIT's Teaching Systems Lab. We've interviewed over 90 teachers and school leaders and over 30 students about how all of this is actually playing out in schools. I've been hearing about why students cheat using AI, what teachers are doing to stop them, how some teachers and students have found ChatGPT to be helpful for learning. And for the next several weeks, we're going to share what we've learned with you in a mini-series we're calling The Homework Machine.
And now Jesse, who has immersed himself in this research, will be our host and guide for these episodes. Jesse, you can take it from here.
Thanks, Justin, but not so fast. We're going to want your historical knowledge about educational technology to help us unpack and contextualize these stories. So stay close, keep your mic handy. In fact, we're going to hear from you again in this episode.
Sounds good.
All right, well, let's go back to a beginning, December of 2022. We'll start with Steve Ouellette. He's a technology director at the Westwood School District, southwest of Boston. His job includes keeping track of computers and software for the district, but also helping teachers think through how to use technology in their work. He remembers the exact moment he heard about generative AI.
So I think it was December 8th, and I was home sick with COVID. I got an email. I'm on a listserv, with all the tech directors in Massachusetts, and I got an email that said, have AI write your next English paper. The subcaption was, buckle up, here it comes. Someone had basically shared a video of this thing called ChatGPT that was generating an essay about raisin in the sun. And I was like, what is going on here?
Watching the video, Ouellette says he immediately realized that this was a big deal.
Yeah, that was a moment. I've been in this business since 1993, and I don't remember having a really specific reaction to something the way I did when I saw that.
Ouellette emailed the district superintendent and explained the situation to her. There was a new technological tool available to students that could do their homework pretty effectively.
And she had no idea what it was. And I explained to her what it was and sent her a link. And she shot back to me 5 minutes later, and she's like, yeah, we need to write about this. And so we both felt this sense of urgency.
The superintendent asked Ouellette to write a memo to the district's teachers. Ouellette is a technology guy, and out of curiosity and excitement, he decided to experiment. Could ChatGPT draft the memo? He asked ChatGPT to write the first draft and send it to the superintendent. She read it and told Ouellette, this is pretty formal language, it doesn't sound like you. Make it more casual sounding. But Ouellette didn't rewrite the memo himself, he prompted ChatGPT to revise the memo, and he told it, make it more conversational.
I said, you need to write something funny about how, France was going to win the World Cup. And it seamlessly incorporated a little parenthetical thing about, by the way, France is going to win the World Cup. And in the way it did it was magnificent.
Here's the memo ChatGPT wrote.
ChatGPT could also be used to help students learn other languages, such as Spanish or French, which, by the way, I think will win the 2022 World Cup. Imagine being able to have a conversation with ChatGPT in French and receiving instant corrections and feedback on your pronunciation and grammar. The possibilities are truly endless.
Side note, I'm not that impressed with how ChatGPT did with that World Cup joke. It says that French will win the World Cup, not France. But that aside, they sent the memo out that Monday. Remember, this was December of 2022. Over the next few months, ULET formed an AI working group in the district. They brought in a guest speaker. They looked at academic policies. They talked to teachers and students. And by the summer of 2023, they had revised academic integrity guidelines as well as some basic training for teachers.
The goal was to inform staff about what this stuff is, to let them know that there are guidelines, and that if they have students, in grades 8 or higher, they can use it with their students. But we also wanted to inform staff how to use it for themselves to make their own work more efficient. The theory behind that is if they're using it, then they'll be more informed to use it responsibly with their kids. And it's nowhere near what it needs to be. I'll be the first to admit it, but we did something.
What Westwood did was quite a bit more than other districts. Last fall, a survey found only about 1/4 of teachers said their school district had provided any guidance or professional development about AI. That's 2 years after the arrival of the technology. At Westwood, the faculty learned about ChatGPT pretty early on, likely before many of their students heard about it. That was not true for other schools.
The first time I heard about ChatGPT was in my English class.
This is Nanki Carr. She just graduated from American High School in Fremont, California, and she heard about ChatGPT from another student back in the spring of 2023.
We were having a conversation about how we were going to approach our research paper assignment that was coming up, and you would have to pick an individual of American significance and prove why they were of American significance and what impact they had. And he was talking about how he just asked this AI platform about how his person of American significance, who was had an impact on America, and he got a really strong thesis statement, and he said, I didn't even have to do anything.
Now, I bleeped that last bit so this student won't get in trouble. But the point here, Nanki says the thesis statement was actually pretty good.
And we were all confused, and we were like, what are you talking about? Like, how did you not have to do anything, and how do you have such a strong thesis statement? Because we were just learning how to write a thesis statement at that time. And he said, there's this online platform. It's driven by artificial intelligence, and it just writes it for you, and it's really thorough. It's really good. You guys should try it. And so that was the first time I heard about it, and I was shocked.
Nanki talked with our colleague Holly McDede, a reporter based in California.
Did you try it?
I did go home and try it. Not for the same assignment, but I went home and I looked it up, like ChatGPT, OpenAI, what is it? And then I asked it a couple questions like, what is the weather like? And if I were to write a story about a given situation, could you write me a story? And it actually answered all my prompts, and it wrote me like a solid paragraph. And so I was shocked, yeah.
Nanki says she doesn't know what the other student did with his thesis statement, but she has a guess.
So I think he did turn it in, and I don't know what kind of disciplinary action he got because there wasn't really much set in stone.
Do you suspect he didn't get any disciplinary action?
I do suspect that because he was oddly smug about how well he had done on that assignment.
As far as Nanki knows, that student didn't get in any trouble. In fact, she's not sure the teachers knew about ChatGPT at that point. And Nanki says that the schools didn't seem to catch on that students were using ChatGPT to cheat until the fall of 2023, the next school year, a whole year after ChatGPT launched. But Nanki says when they did realize what was happening, the school came down hard. Nanki's AP English teacher held a special class meeting to present the new academic integrity policy with a list of sanctions if students were caught using ChatGPT or other AI.
Which included zeros on the assignments or administrative disciplinary action. And if worst came to worst, then it would be suspensions.
At American High School, Nnamani says their policies didn't just ban ChatGPT. Students were also told they couldn't use Grammarly, the grammar check program, or similar AI tools that are often built into students' browsers. But the policies weren't applied consistently. Nnamani says her social studies teacher actually encouraged her to use AI for research.
Because she said, I think it's a really good tool to get all the facts in one spot. Obviously, I'm going to ask you guys to fact check and just cross-check, make sure that everything is correct. But I think it's a really great, tool for you guys to use so that you have everything in one place.
Was that confusing for you or other students?
It was confusing for me personally because I was like, I just don't want to use it at all. Like, I don't even care because I don't need, this habit. I don't want it on my computer. I don't want it anywhere. I just want it, away from me because I didn't want to jeopardize any chance of having a good grade in that class or in any of my classes.
Some 3,000 miles away from Nnamani, another student had quite a different experience. Woody Goss was wrapping up 8th grade in a public school in the suburbs north of New York City when he spoke to us in the spring of 2024. He says his teachers didn't really respond to the arrival of ChatGPT, and that students used AI to get their schoolwork done in almost all of his classes. He says his science class was the worst. The students all have laptops, but the teacher sits in front of the class and can't see what's on the screens. Woody sits in the back.
And you can see everybody's screen, and you can see ChatGPT spitting out the text, and you can see them copy and pasting it into their paper.
You could literally see your fellow students using ChatGPT, not in a way...
And copy and pasting it into the paper, yup.
If you had to estimate, say in a classroom of 20 students, how many were using ChatGPT to cheat the way that you're describing, how many would you say?
Okay, so I'd say that there's 10 people in that class using it for everything, like cheating on the whole paper's AI. I'd say there's another 5 that probably half of it's written by AI, but they do actually read it through and go, gee, maybe I don't want to include the part that says as a large language model, but they read it through and copy parts and splice bits and do whatever. Then I'd say, so you've got 5 remaining. I'd say probably 4 of that 5 do the paper legitimately. So there's 4 people doing it legitimately. And then there's another 1 that's, I don't know, it's kind of a mix. They plagiarize stuff, but it's a paragraph in their entire thing. And I'd say of those 4, unless you've got a really not a super smart tech kid, I'd say probably all 4 of those are using AI in some way. It's just using it appropriately.
Woody says that some of his teachers were apparently totally oblivious to generative AI, but not his science teacher. She tried to encourage students to use it in a way that would help them learn.
That teacher was really trying. She seemed to grasp the concept that there was AI being used, and she was like, we're going to learn how to use AI legitimately, and how do we use it in our research? And everybody heard, oh, you can use AI in your paper, and they all didn't actually listen to what she was saying. Please use it as a secondary source. And they all went, okay, I'm going to use ChatGPT to write my paper.
Do you have any teachers who effectively managed this? Either in their... No.
I have... The science teacher really tried. She did actually provide, unlike all the other teachers, she actually provided instruction. Hey, here's how we're going to use it. Everybody ignored it, but she did try. All my other teachers just flat out ignored it the whole year. Except for the ELA teacher who said we're all writing paper benchmarks, which was a nightmare.
Why was that a nightmare?
Because I'd say for a lot of us, not even including AI, we're all digital people on Chromebooks. We don't know how to write a paper benchmark, which you could argue is its own problem. But then you had a million kids yelling and screaming about that because, God forbid, you have to write a paper benchmark. Still.
So, according to Woody, his English teacher made the students write things out by hand. which actually did keep people from using ChatGPT, although Woody thinks that created other problems. Some people have suggested that Woody doesn't need to worry. According to him, he's doing his work legitimately. Assuming that's true and that the other students are using ChatGPT, then it will all come out in the wash. He'll actually learn what he's supposed to, and the others won't. And eventually that will be obvious and give him an advantage. Maybe in getting into college, maybe on tests, maybe in life. But Woody doesn't see it that way. In his world, grades matter. Students are under pressure. When students choose to cheat, that can impact how the teachers teach the material and the pace of learning, which puts even more pressure on the students who are trying to do the work themselves.
Well, I mean, it's frustrating. It's a compounding effect. I'd say at the beginning of the year, there wasn't a lot of students using AI, and I'd say it's shifted as the pacing gets faster, then more kids feel like they need it because they feel like they're going to fail if they don't have it, so it piles on itself. And it also, I was never the fast worker in the class. I can do the work, but I'm like dyslexic anyway, so it takes me forever to do the work anyway. I'd say the number of people not using it, like the number of people holding out and being like, I'm going to do my work legitimately, is going down because it's just, there's no room for, especially in the district where I am, where we're very grade grubby. It's expected, like, you got to have an A in every class. So everybody's, I got to get that A, I got to get this assignment in on time.
All right, now I'd like to bring Justin Reich back to the program. Justin has studied technology in schools over the decades, and he can help us make sense of the stories we just heard. Welcome back, Justin.
Thanks for having me, Jesse.
So the interviews I shared have been done over the past 2 years, and we're now coming up on 3 years since ChatGPT was unveiled in November of 2022. So I'm curious what overall reactions you're having as you listen back to these stories.
Well, the first thing it makes me think of is something that we've talked about before, which is just this idea of instantaneous arrival is so unusual for an education technology. I mean, the joke we make sometimes is that, no kid ever dragged their own smartboard into a classroom. Typically, education technology was purchased by schools, and that meant the schools could have at least something of a plan before they gave all their teachers online grade books, or they bought all their kids Chromebooks, or they bought all their kids iPads, or whatever else it is. But there is zero time for planning. There's zero time for preparation. Steve Hewlett says, this is urgent. There's something which is happening right now, and we need to deal with it. And then schools have really different capacities to deal with that. So an affluent place like Westwood, where they probably have recovered pretty well from the pandemic, where things are feeling like they're back on track. They probably have plenty of resources to hire substitute teachers. The population of kids they serve have all kinds of challenges, but not nearly the challenges they might encounter in some of their urban neighborhoods nearby or rural neighborhoods out west. They're in a good place to be able to say, I've got some extra time to be able to manage this. Like, let's get started. Teachers have extra time to be on the working group. Let's get started working on this. At other places, if many schools in November 2022 and the spring of 2023 were still drowning in the challenges of chronic absenteeism, of learning loss, of school that felt like it really hadn't bounced back yet. And so this new thing shows up, and not every school in the country is on the same footing in figuring out how to deal with it. But of course, even if a school doesn't have an institutional plan to deal with it, every teacher has to deal with it. So Miss O'Neill walks into her classroom and all of her students are using Bing. And she goes, Bing is the web browser that you use to download Google Chrome so you can never have to use Bing again. Why are all my students using Bing on a Chromebook? Like, none of this makes sense. And it's what a great story to remind us how significantly and quickly things changed and how there was no choice to postpone this. There was no way to say, we'll just maybe we'll buy the smart boards, but we'll buy them next year. We'll buy them 2 years after that. Let's just work on other stuff for now. You as an educator had this in your classroom and had to decide what you were going to do.
Well, speaking of no option to postpone, I want to play you something that Sam Altman said about all of this back in 2023. You know that Sam Altman was one of the founders of OpenAI, the company responsible for ChatGPT, and he's the CEO. You may remember he was actually ousted from the company briefly and then reinstated in this episode they're now calling The Blip. And one thing that he's gotten some criticism for is just releasing new versions of ChatGPT out into the world, arguably without a lot of thought about what impact that might have or without a lot of support for institutions like schools that might be impacted by AI. And in 2023, the hosts of the New York Times podcast Hard Fork asked him about that, and this is what he said.
You know, one example that I think is instructive because it was the first and the loudest is what happened with ChatGPT in education. Days, at least weeks, but I think days after the release of ChatGPT, school districts were like falling all over themselves to ban ChatGPT. And that didn't really surprise us. Like that we could have predicted and did predict. The thing that happened after that quickly was, you know, like weeks to months, was school districts and teachers saying, hey, actually, we made a mistake. And this is really important part of the future of education. And the benefits far outweigh the downside. And not only are we unbanning it, we're encouraging our teachers to make use of it in the classroom. We're encouraging our students to get really good at this tool because it's going to be part of the way people live. And, you know, then there was like a big discussion about what the kind of path forward should be. And that is just not something that could have happened without releasing.
So, Justin, you were paying pretty close attention in 2022 and 2023 when ChatGPT was first unleashed upon schools. Do you think Altman's account is historically accurate?
Well, I actually got to hear Sam Altman give some version of this because he came to MIT not long after November 2022, gave a talk that was facilitated by Sally Kornbluth, our president. And he said something along the lines, I think the question was something like, you know, where are their big wins for ChatGPT? And he was like, well, education's a slam dunk. This is a place where very obviously we're seeing benefits, not really seeing any downsides. Things are just immediately improving society. So this is going to be a fast win for us. And yeah, you know, it's delusional. It's not at all connected to what is actually happening in reality in schools. I'm sure some of it is if I built a technology product, I'd be pretty excited to hear the voices of people who are happy with it. You know, people in powerful places don't always have great sources of information about what happens.
And everything he says has a kind of factual basis to it, but it adds up to a kind of orderly picture of what happens that to me doesn't really reflect the chaos that educators were experiencing.
Also, if you just know something about schools, this idea that like as soon as it released, they were all doing something. It's like, no, that's not how schools work. And then really quickly after doing it, they reverse themselves. And you're like, no, you do not like schools are carrier fleets. Schools are
super tankers.
Are super tankers. Like when they turn slowly and they turn with inertia. And when they go back, it takes a lot of time to move that backwards. But even just in the handful of stories that we heard from a couple of students, one teacher who said there was nothing happening in their schools. It wasn't being banned. It wasn't being encouraged. Teachers were kind of figuring out on their own what to do with it. And I mean, if you talk to teachers and students, it's not very hard to get stories where you get the sense of like, oh, this is not an unambiguously good thing. Like this is making Nnamani nervous because pretty clearly students are using this to bypass their learning in ways that they shouldn't. Woody is really concerned that his classes are moving faster than they're supposed to because teachers are getting the wrong feedback from students because students, instead of doing the work and doing the learning and figuring things out, are just copying, pasting questions from ChatGPT into their assignments. And Woody's is telling us he's trying to do the right thing, and this isn't working here. And even Steve, who's in like the best possible circumstances, a really experienced, really talented tech director with a really supportive superintendent, really supportive community, cool things happening in their schools, as much good work as he's doing, I think he still feels like that he's just barely taking the first steps that might be needed to get his hands wrapped around this thing.
Yeah, and in fact, I actually played that Sam Altman tape for him, and, you know, and arguably what Sam Altman describes most closely resembles Westwood and Steve Ouellette. Like, of all the people we heard from, his story is the closest to Sam Altman's account of what happened. But this is what he had to say.
Not to highlight Westwood, but when I talk to my peers in neighboring districts, no one's doing anything. Like, they're just starting to think about creating guidelines. And so we're kind of just like building the plane, while we fly it.
For the next 6 episodes, we're going to hear stories of building the plane as we fly it. We'll hear from the teachers who are struggling to prevent their students from using ChatGPT to bypass learning and thinking. We'll talk with students about why they turn to AI to get their work done, and what it feels like to be falsely accused of using AI. And we'll hear from teachers, students, and school leaders who have found ways to use AI to help them teach or learn. And in our next episode, what even is generative AI? And why does the so-called jagged frontier of this technology make it so challenging when it shows up in schools?
It doesn't think. It doesn't understand. It predicts, one word at a time.
That's next time on The Homework Machine. This episode was produced by me, Jesse Dukes. We had editing from Ruxandra Guidi and Alexandra Salomon. Reporting and research from Holly McDede, Natasha Esteves, Andrew Meriwether, and Chris Bagg. Sound design and music supervision by Stephen Jackson. Production support from Yebu G. Data analysis from Manee, Ngozi, Nnamani, and Manasa Kudumu. Special thanks to Josh Sheldon, Camilla Lee, Liz Huttner, and Eric Klopfer. Administrative support from Jessica Rondon. The research and reporting you heard in this episode was supported by the Spencer Foundation, the Kapor Foundation, the Jameel World Education Lab, the Social and Ethical Responsibility of Computing Initiative at MIT, and the RAISE Initiative, Responsible AI for Social Empowerment and Education, also at MIT. And we had support from Google's Academic Research Awards program. The Homework Machine is a production of the Teaching Systems Lab, Justin Reich director. The lab is located at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, more commonly known to the world as MIT.